The NAFTA Podcast.
Sometimes may be good, sometimes may be shit.
NAFTA Podcast, we're back. We are powering through our team previews, and today we are thrilled to be joined with a member of the Up the Cherries in All Department podcast, Instagram page. You guys do a lot of things. Craig, how you doing? Welcome to the NAFTA Podcast. Thanks for taking the time to talk football, soccer with two Americans, man.
Thank you so much for having me on. An absolute pleasure to join you. And like you say, we've got so much that we do now. We started off as a very, very small YouTube channel, but it's gradually grown and grown and grown and grown. We've got Harry Redknapp on. Well, I think he's been on about 6 or 7 times now. So, yeah, it's always a pleasure to have him on. He's a local to the football club. He still loves AFC Bournemouth. It's not normally, a lot of people would associate Harry Redknapp with West Ham United. But Harry's got so much time for our football club, and he's a regular down at Dean Court. So, yeah, it's great to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I told you before we started recording, Michael being a Liverpool fan, myself being a Man City fan, obviously we kind of fell into that Americans pick a team and they end up being very good, but we love getting to talk to people who are supporting a team that in America here is a little bit off the beaten path, so we're pumped to have you. What I would love to do is start us off with that. We don't have the luxury of being born into fandom here, right? So how did you become a Bournemouth fan? How did it develop? And then, much like us, you like something, but not a lot of people like something enough to create a content or create a YouTube channel or whatever around it. What was ultimately the push for you to be like, hey, I want to engage with people about Bournemouth and kind of drive your liking the club into loving the club into like wanting to make your day about the club for the most part sometimes?
Well, my story is quite a strange one because I'm not actually born and bred in Bournemouth. So I was born and bred in a place called Reading. So a lot of American fans will know of Reading Football Club. So I grew up years ago going to their old Elm Park. And then they moved to the Beazley Stadium, of course, got promoted to the Premier League. And I moved down to Bournemouth when Bournemouth were right on their knees. Reading were in the Premier League at this time, and Bournemouth had just been relegated to League Two, but not just that. Bournemouth had been relegated and docked 17 points. So we had an uphill struggle. Rotherham had also been deducted 17 points, and Luton had been deducted 30 points. And eventually they ended up going down. So the season started with Kevin Bond, and he was swiftly replaced after a bit of a poor start by somebody who I knew very, very well, a manager called Jimmy Quinn. And I thought, oh no, straight away. I thought this is going to be the shortest affiliation with a football club because the club was in financial difficulty from the very start of that season. There was bailiffs locking the club shop doors, taking stock out of it. Jeff Moyston kept having to dig into his own pocket to keep the club afloat. It was an absolute mess. And the season just went from bad to worse at that point. We was pretty much nailed on to be relegated out of the Football League, which I know that Eddie Mitchell, who is one of our former chairmen, did say wouldn't have killed the club. I think, most Bournemouth fans realistically know that it probably would have killed the club had we been relegated out of the Football League. And we sacked Jimmy Quinn at the end of the year, and we appointed somebody who everybody will know very, very well as Eddie Howe, or Sir Eddie Howe, or King Eddie Howe of Poole and Bournemouth. You can give him so many accreditations. And it started off fairly slowly, but he brought back, of course, Steve Fletcher, who was a hero at the football club, somebody he had played with during his time. Eddie Howe had had a bad run with injuries throughout his career and had to give up the game early. And instead of going and sulking about that, he actually went and started learning the trade, and he managed to keep us up. There was two games in particular, a win away against Chester, which started the dream of staying in the Football League. That was the dream at the time, staying in the Football League.
Yeah.
But then the game against Grimsby, where we was 1-0 down and ended up winning 2-1 to actually save the club from dropping out of the Football League. And that was such a momentous shift from, where we had been left by Jimmy Quinn, that it's that effectively, plus Jeff Mostyn having to shell out of his own pocket to keep that club afloat, save this football club. We then, the following season, got promoted, and it just built on from there. And that's where my love for this football club was. It was a tiny little football club with 3 sides to the stadium, believe it or not. That 4th stand is actually a temporary stand. The Ted Shed is a temporary stand still at this moment in time. And we went through League One, and was unlucky not to win that division under Eddie Howe. Of course, Eddie did leave prior to that and come back. Lee Bradbury did a good job. Paul Groves not so much so. But if Paul Groves had done a decent job, where would we have been? Probably not where we are now. And then we went into the Championship, and after 2 seasons, we got promoted to the Premier League. At this point, there was a momentous shift, because if you imagine Reading, what I knew growing up with, which was firstly a club that always struggled, but kind of overachieved, because they nearly did get into the Premier League in 1995, but lost out to Bolton Wanderers. And it felt like history was repeating itself again, but we'd actually managed to do it. And I think without that, initial stage of watching this club struggle and be on its knees and having to, for years, we had to buy players on freeze. And Eddie did a fantastic job. Steve Cook, Simon Francis, Charlie Daniels, they were also rans at clubs, where they were before. Steve Cook, even when he joined Bournemouth under Paul Groves, was hardly getting a sniff until Eddie come in and then gave him a run. And then he was pretty much ever present after that. That is really my story of becoming a Bournemouth fan, which is unique because Bournemouth and Reading hate each other with a passion. but what's great about that, and what I love about that, is that it was a story where I moved and started supporting my local club, and that local club then surpassed. And I do wish Reading well. I hope they, manage to get themselves out of League One. I'd love to see them in the Premier League with us, but not many other Bournemouth fans would say that. But it's just such a great story, and every Bournemouth fan has got their own little story of how they supported the club. Some throughout the years watched us go very, very close to going bust in the Winter Gardens, and Trevor Watkins saving the club, and Southampton fans, believe it or not, putting money in charity buckets to actually keep the club afloat. This club's never been where it is now. And that's what a lot of people, I think, need to realise, is this club was an unfashionable club. You imagine, a club like the lower ends of, the football pyramid, Harrogate, Rochdale, something like that. It gives those fans of those clubs hope that they can achieve something. And then Luton's gone and done, exactly the same, which I'm absolutely delighted for them. And I really do hope that they stay up. I think it's going to be a tough job, but I hope that the dream story, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. I always try to kind of put a bit of a lens, an American lens, on what we do here and what we talk about, just because most of our viewers are American. So if they can relate it to something that they know, it's easier. Your story and what you just explained is something that we cannot replicate here. We don't have relegation in any sport. We have draft for a team that is at the bottom. So what I always like to ask someone who's a fan of a team like Bournemouth is, when your team is at the edge of falling out of the football league, what was the mindset like? And then when you finally do push on even the League One, the Championship, and then the Premier League, your mindset into a season has to be very different than, unfortunately, like Michael getting to be a Liverpool fan, myself being a Man City fan. How do you set that up? How do you prepare yourself for that each season, I guess?
Well, this is another unique situation that we're in this season, because I think that the hopes aren't just staying in the Premier League now. I think, with Bill Foley, and I'm sure we'll come on to that, I think, our optimism now is, right, we can actually kick on. We can kick on. Getting promoted to the Championship all those years ago was crazy in itself. Then getting promoted, so that was in 2013, which is literally, 10 years ago. Then, of course, we've got promoted to the Premier League in 2015. Yes, we was relegated, and that was during COVID, and that was horrid. That was horrid. And it felt like, to put it into perspective, when we were relegated, I thought, right, okay, the dream's over. We're never going to really get back there. But, it's great to have seen it for 5 seasons. We've lived the dream. We've finished 9th. We was within touching distance of Europe. All side that was put together in League One. So it's remarkable. But I think, to answer your question, this is the first season where we can say quite, even when we was under Eddie Howe, because Eddie, we spent money, but we didn't spend ridiculous amounts of money. It was always going to be like, if we get some injuries, the aim is to just stay up, stay in the Premier League. This season is unique because it's not like that.
Yeah. Is there also a sense too, and we didn't tell you this beforehand, and I don't know how much you know American sports. We're both from Ohio, so we grew up Cleveland fans, right? So there's a lot of heartache, there's a lot of pain, but there's also a lot of finding unique ways to put a team on the field that can compete and maybe win. And I think you mentioned that a little bit earlier with getting people on a free and crafting a team a different way. I've asked a couple of different people I've done a podcast with that aren't Big Six clubs, do those struggles actually make you more connected with the team when you know that there has to be a unique perspective, a unique way to run this club? You can't go out and sign Erling Haaland. Does that make you feel like closer to this team than if you were a Manchester United fan per se?
What's unique about this football club is we have stayed at our similar sort of size throughout these years. So, of course, yes, we built an extra stand on the end of the stadium, but the football club's always been a family club, and therefore you always feel connected to it. There's been times throughout the years where we've had to pinch ourselves. The 4-3 win against Liverpool, for example, was a huge result.
Yeah, Michael, you remember that?
Sorry,
I do. No, you're all right. You're good.
But yeah, there's all these stories throughout the years. One that you'll probably prefer a bit more, where we was 3-1 down against Everton, and we was just drifting, to a defeat, and then out of nowhere we've equalized and 3-3. And it's these stories, you do feel more connected. You do feel more that you don't take things for granted. And that's where the shift is now, is that we expect to stay in the Premier League. I can't even believe I'm even saying that, because well, we expect this season to stay in the Premier League. And I'm sure we'll come on to the manager. I'm sure we'll come on to the owner and what he's done in the US, and what he's trying to replicate over here. But it's a story of a club that has struggled for existence and come up trumps, really.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think I could still see the behind the goal video of Nathan Ake kicking the ball in the back of our net, like in my head. It's just burned in the back, that 4-3 win. For sure. Yeah, so you just mentioned, going from first like Scott Parker and then to Gary O'Neill and now to Iraola. I'm actually I don't know if I'm a big fan, but I like how Iraola plays. I like how he gets his team. I think you guys are going to be very tough to play against for a lot of those, even the big teams too. If you guys, string together, get that press going, I think it could be really interesting. We just did our season preview, and I think John, you can correct me because I think I'm the highest on Bournemouth of any of us four. I like who you guys have brought in. I really like Traore. The Kirkes guy, I'm not too sure about that at left back, but I think defense always is very good. I haven't seen any preseason Bournemouth, but yeah, what have you been seeing that's different from that Gary O'Neill team to this Iraola team?
I think yes, yeah. I saw the friendly against Lorient. The friendlies have been a little bit of a mixed bag. We beat Southampton away. We beat Lorient. We got beat by Atalanta. We was beaten by Maccabi Tel Aviv in Malaga, and beat Hibernian in the friendly. So that's our friendlies so far. I think what Iraola does demand is that the players are really the intensity's gone up in the game. So the high press. And I've always said that this is the way that Bournemouth really should play. Under Eddie Howe, we played from the back, but we was very, very intense. And that kind of changed with Scott Parker. Scott Parker, when we was in the Championship, okay, firstly, we had Jason Tindall, who, of course, he's Eddie Howe's number 2. Jason Tindall, take nothing away from him, isn't a manager, but he's a very, very, very good coach. He's an outstanding coach. You've probably seen all the memes that he always wants to be center of attention. But yeah, he's a lovely man, but he's not a manager. He's a coach. He works best with Eddie. He tried to play the Eddie way, and it didn't really succeed. So, of course, he was sacked. It was after 2 poor performances. One was a defeat against Reading, where we was absolutely woeful. And, my brothers absolutely ribbed me about that for days. But the second one was a game against Sheffield Wednesday, I think they were rock bottom of the Championship at the time. And we were terrible that game. And it wasn't working. It was probably the right decision to actually relieve Jason Tindall, because with the side we had Arnaut Danjuma, we should have been competing to be promoted, the season prior to what we did. And brought in Jonathan Woodgate. Woodgate did a good job to get us over the line and, managed to get us into the playoff places. Should we have gone up under Jonathan Woodgate? Of course, we played Brentford in the first leg and the second leg of the playoffs. First leg, we won 1-0, good performance. And then we went 2-0 up on Aguirre. And I thought, right, okay, we are going to do this, because it was either Swansea or Barnsley in the final. And I can't knock him for this, because he's been a very, very good player. He's a player that I doubted, but he's been a good player for us. Chris Metham pulled down in Mbeumo, who was running through. I think it was in Mbeumo, who plays for Brentford. and of course got sent off, and that whole dynamic of the game changed. Emi Martinez then scored, and yeah, it all just fell apart. And going into that second season, Scott Parker was always their number one choice. I should make that point clear. He was
Mhm.
always the number one choice, but he'd just been promoted with Fulham.
Mhm.
Because Fulham were then relegated, he made the change and come to Bournemouth. And he got 37 points out of the first 15 games. It was one of the quickest starts that any team has ever made in the Championship. And I started to think, right, okay, can we go after the points record? Can we, really do something remarkable here? And then Scott Parker's failings come out. Of course, we got beat by Derby, who of course got relegated.
Mhm.
Drew against Reading. We didn't beat Peterborough at all that season. And we managed to struggle over the line. And a lot of that has to be credit given to Kiefer Moore. Scott Parker did sometimes come up trumps when the pressure was on. I've got to say that before that Nottingham Forest game, where we eventually won promotion back to the Premier League, I thought, well, what is he going to do? But he did do the right things that game. And I've got to give him credit. But he was very defensive. He let the team play in front of us. Against Reading at home, we should have been about 5-0 up. We should have been out of sight at half time. And I don't understand what went through his mind to actually make the substitutions he did, to actually then throw that lead away and nearly throw the game away. To be honest, Reading should have won that match. And I think any Bournemouth fan, despite their dislike of Reading, would say that. And we went into the Premier League season. We won the first game against Aston Villa. And I thought, right, okay, that's good. And then we come up against, as you can probably remember, that horrible scenario where we had Man City first, then Arsenal, then Liverpool. Man City, even though we got beat 4-0, was probably the best of the three games. Arsenal, we just sat back, went 2-0 down, and then at that point thought, oh, we might as well go for this. And of course, Saliba added a great one at the end. And I was there at that fateful game at Anfield. I didn't expect anything from that game. Don't get me wrong. I didn't go up to Liverpool thinking, right, okay, we're going to do something here. But Michael, I'm sure you watched it, and we just sat back for the entire 90 minutes being picked off by Liverpool. And then Scott Parker come out and said, the players aren't good enough. We are going to experience more defeats. And I spoke to Chris Sutton and Robbie Savage on the way home, and I said, he's got to go. And they disagreed with me. They said, no, you can't sack him. Look at what he's done. He's got you out of the Championship. Gary O'Neill come in and, picked those players up off the floor to start off with. I'm going to give Gary O'Neill masses of credit here, but also say a couple of his failings. He picked those players up off the floor and he managed to turn them round. And the first game was a 0-0 draw against Wolves. And everybody might think, right, okay, boring. And it was boring. It was boring. But that result after a 9-0 thrashing is just the result you want. And then we picked up a 3-2 win against Forest. Between that game against Liverpool and the next defeat, which was against Southampton, every team in the Premier League, including Man City, Liverpool, whoever, had been beaten during that time. And Gary deserves so much credit for that. Where Gary went wrong, and I think this is where Iriola, and why I want to make this point, is that during two games, especially against Spurs at home, we was 2-0 up, lost 3-2. And the worst one, Leeds away, we was 3-1 up, got beat 4-3. What we did was we did what Scott Parker did, and we sat too far back. Now, our defence, and it's probably our weakest point, isn't strong enough. At the moment, going into this Premier League season, with Kirkes that you've mentioned, and Zabania as well, who was signed in January, but we haven't seen much of. I think we have got a lot stronger. But it wasn't good enough last season, our defence. And Gary O'Neill managed to save the club from getting relegated by going for the games like Eddie Howe used to.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
attacked teams. That Liverpool 1-0 win at home, we attacked Liverpool. Fulham, we went 1-0 down. We didn't stop. We kept going, and we then ended up winning that game. The Leeds 4-1 win at home was a walkover. It could have been a lot more. And Gary deserves a lot of credit for, firstly, he made mistakes. He made mistakes, and we can say that. And I've spoken to a Wolves podcast today, talking Wolves, and I turned around to them and said, he made those mistakes by sitting back, but he's also corrected that style of play. And
Mhm.
that's what's
Mhm.
good about Gary O'Neill. He's very I've met him in person, which I was lucky enough to do so. He's a very analytical person. He will look at teams and go, right, okay, if they're playing this way, we do this, we do, and he'll play like that. But I think doing that as well, it gives your opponents the impetus to dictate that game.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when we went, you know, when we played it how we wanted to play it, we got the results to keep us in the Premier League. That Spurs 3-2 win was remarkable. We didn't give up.
Mhm.
Now, if that had been in October last season, we would have lost that game.
Right.
But
Right.
we didn't because we kept going. The Arsenal defeat, I know we did lose that game, but we pushed Arsenal all the way. And let's be fair, Arsenal were very, very good at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
They
Mhm.
were
For sure.
outstanding. I think Iriola, though, what he does bring is, and I've actually done an interview, and I tell you what, it was a remarkable interview to do. Unfortunately, he didn't come on himself because he doesn't speak very good English. But
Mhm.
Mikel Istari is his name. Now he is a Basque. Well, he's a Basque coach. He was actually the manager of the Basque national team for a number of years. And of course, that means he knows, of course, Julian Lopetegui, who's recently left Wolves and been replaced by Gary O'Neill.
Yep.
But
Yep.
Mikel Arteta, Unai Emery, of course, he knows Iriola, and
Mhm.
also Xabi Alonso. And it's that pressure, that high press, going towards players, making sure that you're attacking from you're defending effectively from the front, I should say. So
Mhm. Mhm.
those defenders have got no room or no time or no space to actually go, right, okay, we are going to do this. Whereas Scott Parker, what everybody would do is go all the way back, and then players would be able to pick teams off. And let's be fair, Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City, Man United, Spurs, they've all got better players than we have. They all have, at the end of the day, if our players, were faultless, they wouldn't be playing for AFC Bournemouth. They'd be playing for somebody else.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and that's the thing is we put teams under pressure, towards the end.
Mhm.
And that's
Mhm.
what Iriola will bring. He's a different style of manager. And of course, I know we'll probably come on to the signings we've made and the investment by Bill Foley, but initially, when we sacked Gary O'Neill, there was a number of names bounded about. Frank Lampard was one of them. Don't tell Harry, but I didn't want Frank here. But um, we had Jesse Marsh that was also
Yeah.
mentioned,
Yeah.
who had struggled at Leeds. I think, really, he wouldn't have been the right man to take on this job. Stephen Gerrard, you know, uh, again, don't tell Harry, but I don't really think much of what Stephen Gerrard's done. He's done a very good job in Scottish football, but then
Mhm.
again,
Mhm.
so could I. Um, but
You get one of the
but
two teams, definitely.
Well, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I'm ever going to manage in Scotland, I'm not going to go to Hamilton Academical, whoever
Right.
they are.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so but when Iriola was announced, I thought, right, that's the right move. He's one of the hottest prospects in football. Look at what he's done with Rayo Vallecano. And to put this into perspective, it's like if Luton's manager, Rob Edwards, then took Luton into the Champions League places. Okay, Iriola couldn't keep Rayo Vallecano in those places, but he did get them into that position at one point during that season. He also beat Barcelona and Real Madrid, Barcelona on a couple of occasions, in fact. That is a sign of a very, very good manager. And I think it's exciting what he's done. And I think it's, and I know this sounds awful, I think it's a managerial appointment that was planned for some time, because the players that was brought in during the January window, Gary O'Neill or Iriola, aren't responsible for the signings at Bournemouth. The person that's involved in the signings is Richard Hughes, and the coach is a scouting team. And then you've got Neil Blake, who does all the financials. And those players that come in, thinking back to it, were players that were suitable for Iriola rather than Gary O'Neill.
Do you feel like there was, and you just mentioned this, but did you feel like when they made these signings and when they made these decisions for personnel, that aspirationally they were like, we need someone that can coach a pressing team, a team that is going to be on the front foot, and then it just so happened that like the paths crossed, and this is the guy that you got. Like I can't imagine that they were circling this guy and waiting for him to want to move, but I have to assume that there was like, hey, this is how we want to play. This is how we want to be known in the Premier League.
Yeah, I think most definitely. I didn't see it at the time. I didn't imagine it at the time. I didn't really know much about Iriola. Watched a little bit of Spanish football, and I knew of the name. Of course, he was at Athletic Bilbao beforehand as well, and did very, very good job there. Worked under Marcelo Bielsa, in fact, which I wonder is why his name got actually picked up in the first place. But I think the signings that we made were set for Iriola's reign and that different change of style, because at times some of the football was boring under Gary O'Neill and also under Scott Parker. Well, most of the time it was under Scott Parker. To be unfair, if we hadn't got off to such a good start in the Championship, would we have even been in the Premier League? I don't think we would have.
Interesting.
But yeah, I think the style was set. They decided what they wanted to do before they actually did it.
Do you, and Michael, I'll let you be the bad guy here in a second. With this mindset and with this way to play now that you are trying to roll out and Real is going to try to roll out, which player brought in this year are you most excited to hopefully get a full season of games, get a full run with the squad?
Well, I think Hamid Traore looks fantastic and a good signing for Sassuolo. Of course, he was here last season. Milos Kerkez, who's the left back. Now, of course, we had Jordan Zamora for a large part. As soon as it was a bit of a weird one, that. And there is some things that I will bring up that are a little bit weird, what have happened, both last season and at the start of this season. And some of the weird things was Jordan Zamora being announced by Udinese, kind of in that relegation run-in. Now, Gary O'Neill did the right thing and kind of segregated him off from the squad. You can't have a player that, hasn't got the dedication or the, want to play for this football club or has decided his career, exists elsewhere. Decision. And Matis Viña was very, very good at what, when he come in. In fact, I was disappointed that we didn't sign him. But I would say that Milos Kerkez is a step up from that again. And I think from what I've seen of him, and Alkmaar fans do rave about him, I think, he looks outstanding. He looks outstanding in the friendly with Lorient. His runs through, he wins fouls because he's so quick, and players will bring him down. We didn't get a penalty all season last season, so
actually, about that.
So I've got no doubt that we will win one next season because of Kerkez and the intensity and the speed that he plays at. Justin Kluivert, of course, is signed from Roma. He looks very, very good as well. We've signed a goalkeeper as backup. He's a Romanian player. And there's also rumours bounding about Alex Scott. He's a 19-year-old from Bristol City, and he's highly rated. In fact, he was actually at Bournemouth for a short period of time, in the youth setup, but we didn't choose to keep him on board at the time. But he's of course turned into something that's quite incredible, and is probably the highest rated player in the championship at the moment. And there's also a rumour now, and well, to be honest, Mark McAdam has announced it. Mark McAdam is kind of the messiah of AFC Bournemouth transfers. So if you want to know who's going to AFC Bournemouth, listen to Mark McAdam. And he said that Max Aarons is going to be on his way from Norwich. So there's a lot to be optimistic about. There's a lot to be optimistic about. And this isn't a side now that should be fighting to stave off relegation. This is a side that should be, I think it would take a couple of seasons, but need to be looking to press up the league.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, like I said, I'll let you be the bad guy here.
So you'd mentioned the defense and then this kind of style of play that you're going to get with Iraola. I think you guys are loaded on the wings. I mean, you have Tavernier, Ouattara, Kluivert now. I think Traore can play there. I'm not sure if he's going to be in the midfield with Billing, or if he's going to be on that wing. But even David Brooks, I think he was on loan, if I'm not mistaken, and came back. Or is he kind of like a new signing?
No, he was. Unfortunately, he did have lymphoma disease.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, he did have lymphoma disease, and luckily he's got the all clear. He actually got that all clear before the Nottingham Forest game, which was, of course, a great day for him, great day
Absolutely
for the football, really. He is going to be like a new signing though, next season, because we didn't see much of him last season. When he did play, I think he was getting into it. From that, I think it will always take a little bit of time. But in pre-season, I think he's looked very, very good, and he's worked his socks off to get back to where he is.
Right.
For sure.
So when you're looking at that and that front line who's going to be pressing, it's good to have those options there. Obviously, people could get tired. You just want to mix it up a little bit or find that perfect blend of those front three players. With all the teams kind of moving towards playing out of the back, especially like trying to find that build-up play. You lost Lerma on the free. He was that defensive mid block, kind of what you're looking for now in a sense. That's the only thing I worry about is that like that pivot and then the center defensive or center back. Once you get out of, maybe if they break the press on you, that's the only thing I'm kind of worried about. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that might be one of our failings. Lewis Cook, I think, will play in that position.
Yep.
But one thing I would say about Lewis Cook, again, very injury prone. So, yeah, that's probably somewhere that Iraola has probably thought, right, okay, we do need some more strength in there. I think, Alex Scott is probably a sort of player that could play in that position. He's quite attacking minded, but he seems to be able to play in that position as well. I think the main concern for me at the moment is, well, it might not be in a couple of hours, but is the right back position, because at this moment in time, we let Jack Stacey leave to go to Norwich, and we've got Adam Smith there. Now, Adam Smith is, a great servant to this football club, but I think there was a game last season where, especially against Brighton, where he really got found out. His speed has left him a little bit. Mitoma was just dinking the ball over him, and he was struggling with that. Now, unfortunately, all good players, because, take it back to our first spell in the Premier League, he would have been able to cope with that all day long. But there comes a time in, whatever sport, in football, NFL, NHL, any sport where a player's performance is gonna go down a little bit, and that I think is what's happened, unfortunately, to Adam Smith. I'm not saying he's a bad player, because he isn't. He's a good, good, solid professional. But personally, I think we need some more strength there. Of course, Max Aarons, if we do sign him, will be a very, very good sign in that position. And I don't think we're going to be finished with just that. I think Alex Scott will probably come in. I think Max Aarons will come in, from what I've heard. I don't think we're stopping there. We've also been linked with a player at Atalanta as well. I'm trying to think of the name, but there's a lot to be optimistic about at this football club.
You just mentioned that, and to build off of that, you talked about the ownership beforehand. 2-part question. 1, do you have a Vegas Knights jersey? 2, how have you seen the atmosphere of the club become different and attract a coach like Ariel, or some of these players that you now have? I mean, I know Justin Kluivert 5 years ago in FIFA was a popular person to pick up, and he may have kicked on with a few other teams and not hit that potential you were thinking, but at the same time, that's not always a guy circled like he's going to go to Bournemouth, right? Like, I think that how has the atmosphere, how has the package of the club changed so that now it's super appealing to come into this club and play, coach, and be part of it?
Yeah, no problem. Well, firstly, I haven't got a Vegas Golden Knights jersey, although they are selling them in the club shop. They are 200 quid, and I've spent almost that on all 3 Bournemouth shirts this season. I don't know why. So I bought the home shirt, and I thought, yeah, that's a lovely home shirt. That's the best one since 2015, the season we got promoted the first time to the Premier League. Then I saw the away one, which is the one I'm wearing. I thought, I don't know about that. Went into the club shop, really liked it in person, so I bought that. And then the 3rd shirt came out, and I was like, yes, I'm definitely buying that. If anybody's seen our 3rd shirt, it is absolutely gorgeous. It is by far the best 3rd shirt in the Premier League. I think it's probably the best shirt in the Premier League this season. And honestly, anybody who wants to follow Bournemouth, you've got to pick up one of those. I tell you what, it's just beautiful. But going back to your earlier point, I think the whole philosophy at the football club has changed, and I think what we have done, Bill Foley, when he come in, and he turned round, and of course the club were struggling. We were now down by the relegation zone, and he said, we won't be relegated. And I know a couple of people within the consortium, and I spoke to them outside, and they said, I don't know if we really should have said that, but he put his money where his mouth was. He spent money, but wisely, in January. I think Neil Blake and Richard Hughes would have known that if they didn't get the decisions right off the field, signing the right players, their heads would be on the chopping block, because Bill Foley, from what I understand, from speaking to Vegas Golden Knights fans, is quite ruthless. And of course, he's been quite ruthless with Gary O'Neill here. Although he did give him the opportunity, I think it was a decision that was probably driven by Richard Hughes and Neil Blake at the time. I don't think he was Bill Foley's man. But the whole change of the philosophy of this football club has been incredible. In fact, on my channel there is, and in fact I speak after, it was when Gary O'Neill was actually sacked by the football club, and I spoke to Simon Jordan and Jim White, who are, they've got part of Talk Sport, which is, a huge thing in the UK. And I spoke to him and I said, look, I think this is the right decision. I think, and what Bill Foley said was so engaging. He was like, if we go down, this is on me. And I don't think he would say that if, he had doubts. I think, he's not one of those owners. He's 77 years old. He's not one of these owners that is going to be coming and, put a load of money in place and then pull out all that money at some point. He's in here for the long run. And
Mhm.
I think why he's taken over at AFC Bournemouth rather than the club is because we have got the stadium project. Now, let's be honest, this man took ice hockey to the desert. You know,
Yeah.
he,
Yeah.
he's either very very brave or damn right bonkers. But
A gambler, some would say, being
a
in
gambler,
Vegas.
yes, yeah, definitely a gambler, yeah, most definitely a gambler. But what he's done, is remarkable.
Yeah.
He's even the cosmetic changes to Dean Court, which, let's be honest, if you've seen it on TV, and go back to the first time we were in the Premier League, some parts of it are looking very worn, very
Hmm.
dilapidated. It's not a Premier League stadium by any
Hmm.
stretch of the imagination. It's not probably even a Championship stadium. Um, and the changes he's made to that straight away from the off have been incredible.
Hmm.
I think, already, they're changing the supporter experience around the club. Yes, the prices have gone up. Some fans aren't happy with that, but if we are going to progress as a football club, that is part and parcel of it. Bill Foley is a businessman first and foremost. He's not going to turn around and say, right, okay, I can pump in all this money, but you keep it to what it was 8 years ago. Which is the last time we had a price rise, and
Hmm.
the shirts have gone up, everything's gone up, but you expect that. As a fan, some fans might have the with it, but I expect it as a fan
Yeah.
because the club is trying to progress. The next steps, and I'm sure this is going to come up within the next couple of weeks, and there's been murmurings of it. There's the training ground is nearly completed. So the training ground at the moment is literally behind Dean Court. It's a really weird, unique setup because
Yeah.
most training grounds are, in flash complexes,
Mhm.
outside of town.
Hmm.
All the players, have, the gym looks outstanding. Everything is, well, probably at Man City, it's probably all plated with gold. But
I've been in it once. I can confirm not plated in gold. I can confirm that. But yeah, it's very
yeah.
nice.
But this training ground, although it is nice, isn't up to the Premier League standards.
Yeah.
And now what Bill Foley has done is he's completed the project that Maxim Denham had, which is to complete that. Now,
Hmm.
once that's been completed, it means we can knock down the old one.
Yeah.
And with that, I think the new stadium is going to come along
Yeah.
because what's very and this is a strange story. This is maybe going a little bit off topic, but at where Dean Court is based, it
Uh-huh.
was actually land that was donated by the Cooper Dean family years and years and years
Okay.
and years ago, before any fans, alive now were around. And they donated it, and that law for this piece of ground stays in place at the council that it needs to be used for sporting purposes. Now, the ground isn't owned by the football club.
Hmm.
It's actually owned by a company called Structure Dean. And going back to what I was saying before, the ground was sold to Structure Dean by a gentleman called Peter Phillips because there was no other alternative. Because if he didn't do that, the club would have folded. Now, of course, Bournemouth have gone through the leagues, and Structure Dean, as being business people, and you can understand it, want more money for it.
Yeah.
But they can't build houses on it. They can't build, what whatever they want. It has to be used for sporting purposes. So
Hmm.
what Bill Foley, I'm sure, is knows is that, and I'm sure this is why he's invested in Bournemouth, is that he can therefore, you know, either A, and I'd love this to happen, but I don't think it will. But refurb, do up the existing stadium, build tiers on it. You can only do so much with that stadium
Yeah.
as it stands at the moment, and also
Mhm.
it would cause the attendance, which is already very small, to actually go down further. What I think will happen is there's a massive car park by Dean Court and also the existing training ground. Knock that down, and build the new one there. I don't want a soulless dome. I don't
Yeah.
want, I don't want a Reading. I don't want a Southampton. I don't want an MK Dons. I want
Yeah.
something that is going to be close, intense. But I believe that Bill Foley, and I've spoken to Jim Fravola, and Jim Fravola's a great man. He's really, really good with the fans, really engaging when you speak to him. I've spoken to him, and it seems like they're not going to do that. They're not going to build a soulless bowl. They want somewhere that fans are going to enjoy going to. Fans will be able to make noise, make it an intimidating place to come to still,
Mhm.
Mhm.
but
Yep.
just in a shiny new stadium that is going to help progress the club on and expandable as well.
Yeah.
The figures I've seen, well, I've seen two figures going around. I think the first one is more likely of 24 and a half,
Okay.
which would put it in a decent, I think that would be okay and be
Yeah.
expandable from there. Some people have said about 37. No, I think that's a little bit ridiculous at this moment in
Mhm.
time, but maybe not in the future because we have got, and this is one thing that a lot of people don't realise about Bournemouth. We've got a great catchment area. Yeah, we've got Southampton, but they're in the Championship now. Don't worry about them. But but
Good call.
but we have got a great catchment area. We've got the whole of Somerset. Dorset's a big county. If we can tap into all these markets, which I'm sure Jim Favola knows. I don't need to tell him how to suck eggs. He knows what he's doing. He will be able to tap into those markets and say, right, people from Somerset, come on, stop yet support watching Yeovil Town. Come and watch Bournemouth in the Premier League. Build that fan base up. And I'm sure this club will grow. And that is what is great about this American consortium. And we're absolutely delighted with them. There's been a couple of fans that have gone on about, some of the decisions that have been made, and
Mhm.
but honestly, I can't doubt them. I think they've been fantastic.
Amazing.
Michael, go ahead. You're going to predictions now. My bad.
Oh, you didn't
Smooth
tell
transition
me. Yeah,
for your
perfect.
sin.
That's what we do. So I think I'm gonna ask you, but I think I'll get my goodwill off first. I
Yeah.
have you finishing in 12th this year, and I was pretty conservative with that. I think if you get I'm still hoping for that midfield. I think those two that pivot positions, even if you just get one, I don't think you have to bring in two completely new guys. But I was trying to gauge my, not lose the most points in our little game that we play. But I went with 12. I went with 12 just because I think, the Spurs, the Chelseas, us as well. I mean, Liverpool. I think we're very susceptible. I think those teams, the way you guys are going to play, you could give them fits a lot. And then I think the mid lower table teams, I think if you guys play how you're describing you would like to see them play, and you just go for it, and I think you have a lot of talent, especially up top, and I think if you just let it fly, I think you could win a ton of those games. So I'm the highest. I have you guys at 12th. What's your outlook? Not necessarily a spot, but just what do you want to see from the season?
Well, I think it's going to be a gradual progression to where Bill Foley wants to get to. Bill Foley has already said, and on that interview that he did with Jim White on Talksport, and like I say, you can find it on my channel.
Mhm.
It's well worth listening to. His plan, I think, is to get the club into Europe at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's realistic enough to know that that's probably not going to happen overnight, but I think he expects a big increase this year and then gradual increases from there on in.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the 11th, that's what I've predicted the club to finish. 11th, is more than acceptable. I think that, I'd be absolutely delighted with that. Um, what I wouldn't be delighted with is a relegation battle.
Mhm.
I don't think we will get relegated. I think we will be absolutely fine. I think there's definitely three teams worse than us, most definitely, this season. Sheffield United, Luton, and I think Everton as well will be down there.
Michael, he's
That's
on.
why
Michael
that's
has. We do this prediction every year. Obviously, Michael has relegated Everton for the past 3 years. It has nothing to do with him being a Liverpool fan, obviously, but he's relegated them in preseason predictions the last 3 years, and he said this year it's actually happening. But
third time's
I didn't
third
mean to
time's the
interrupt.
charm.
Yeah, but I totally agree. I think there's actually 5 teams that are much worse than you all are this season, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah, I
So
think we'll be absolutely fine. I would say 11th is something I think is achievable, and I think that's what we will do. I think Bill Foley will back us in
Mhm.
January. He's not got a never-ending pot of gold, but he's ambitious, and
Mhm.
I think the ambition will be to, right, okay, to make money out of this football club, firstly, I need to sort out the stadium. But secondly, I need a successful football team that will be able to go and win things. A run in a cup would be great, but I
Mhm.
think, progression in the Premier League, is probably far greater. You don't really. Well, you don't get anything really for the Carabao Cup.
no.
The FA
It's
Cup,
actually
yeah,
crazy how little you get. We were talking about it last year. It's like 50 grand or
yeah.
something like that, right? It's insane.
It's not worth, and that's why so many big sides, well, I don't think you can call Man United a big side anymore. But why they're not really putting much,
Yes.
paying much attention to it. But I
Yeah.
think, a run maybe in the FA Cup, a little run, and a decent showing in the Premier League. I think 11th, would keep everybody happy.
Totally agree. Craig, I appreciate you buttering us up with the Man United slander here. Um,
Yeah.
you've been here for about an hour. We love talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. I got 2 more things that we want to do before we get you out of here. One, I've mentioned this before. You obviously have the club has some American ties now with the ownership and whatnot. But since Michael and I have started this pod, and now with Dylan and Nick also on here, we have so many friends that are getting into the Premier League, getting into football, and they don't have a team. And we will push them to random clubs because we're like, hey, we would love for you guys to be involved in this and learn about this team we don't know much about. But what would be the way you would pitch Bournemouth to a new fan here in the U.S. that is looking for a club, looking for a team to support? What are you highlighting for them to be like, this needs to be the club that I wake up every Saturday morning, every Sunday morning to tune into?
I would say be part of something special, because this is a club that, like I say, was on its backside so many years ago. This is a club that now are going places. This is a club where, we are going to build a new stadium without a shadow of a doubt. This is a club that, are going to progress. Somebody who, let's be fair, years ago in Bournemouth, you never saw Bournemouth shirts. This is a club to be proud of and not forget the roots of where we were, but also be proud of where we're going. And I think we will go higher and higher and higher. Yeah, we might not ever win the Premier League. That would be, wow, it would be ridiculous. I think, to be honest, I think I'll streak to Dean Court and back naked, but nobody wants to see that. But I think this is a club that you can be proud of, and it's something special. Something's happening here. Whereas you look at other teams, um, and sorry to pick on Wolves, but Wolves, Everton, they're just going by the by. They're not really doing much. They're clubs that maybe haven't got those ambitions anymore. This club has, and the legacy that Bill Foley, when he does eventually decide that he wants to sell the club on, this is going to be a remarkable story. And it's a friendly club as well. Everybody is nice. It's a club as well. You'll see the players. If
Mhm.
any American fans come over to the UK and go to a Bournemouth match, just stand outside the entrance of Dean Court and you will meet the players. You will be able to speak to people. You will feel part of it. Whereas a lot of clubs have lost that, really.
Yeah.
I love the combination of history with still being part of the community, but also you can tell that there, like you said, something's happening. There's growth. There's going to be building. Craig, thank you so much for jumping on and joining us. Before you go, please tell our listeners where they can find you, where they can listen to the podcast. How do we tune into you all? How can I get our new Bournemouth fans that are listening to us to tap into what you all are doing over there as well?
Of course. So the channel is called Up the Cherries in all departments. You can find us by searching UTC IAD. It's a very, very old saying that's been going around for years. You can find us on YouTube, where we do all the videos. We do our cherry picking show. Harry's been on there, loads of times. I've probably, underestimated by 6 times. But we've also got opposition preview shows and loads and loads and loads of contents. And please do get involved. Please do get involved. We've even got a fantasy football league as well, where you can actually win £100 in a.
Oh, wow.
If you win the fantasy football league, you can win £100 voucher to spend in the AFC Bournemouth club shop. So you never know. And a new American fan might win that, and therefore be able to buy himself his first jersey or second jersey, I would hope, for new season next year.
or the beautiful third one that when you were saying that, I had to go look at them. And I do remember I did away jersey ratings. You guys rated pretty high. I do like that one. The blue with the waves you got going there. That's amazing.
Yes.
Craig, thank you so much for jumping on, joining us. I hope that we can talk to you again in the future. And hey, let's have the Cherries push this season, getting closer to Europe.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, guys.
The NAFTA Podcast.
Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit.